Save the Semantics, Hip Hop Discovery. Today we're going to review Kardinall Offishall's Not For Sale, which is his fourth studio album. My name is Myro.
And I'm Dante.
For those who don't know, Kardinall Offishall is a Canadian rapper or producer. He was kind of popular sort of in like the mid to late 2000s. Most notably known for his song Dangerous with Akon. And
2008.
yeah, that came out in 2008, along with the rest of this album. And we kind of decided, maybe we should just take a look at it and see what kind of music it is.
Yeah.
I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I was thinking like, yeah, maybe it might be interesting to talk about, considering that it's like Canadian, and you have some interest in Canada.
Yeah. So he's from, as they call it, the GTA, the Six, where Drake's from Toronto.
Toronto. Okay.
I don't know much about him, to be honest. Like, I did hear of that song "Dangerous" back in the day, and he's not really big, or he never really was to begin with. So
yeah.
This album.
I
can kind of understand.
I actually did a little.
Why.
I actually did a little bit of research.
What's
like
that?
Before going into this, and I was like thinking like, okay, what kind of influence does he have? And he apparently was like he's been a rapper for a pretty long time. He had this.
I know he's pretty old. He's like 40 or something.
Yeah, yeah, and when he released that album, he was like in his 30s, I think. So he started off doing rap, and he was with this group called the Rascals, and they have a little bit of like hip hop like history with them. They released a single called Northern Touch in 1998, which was the first Canadian rap single to chart in the U.S.
Wow.
So
okay.
yeah, there's a little bit of history there, I think. So when you think of like Canadian rappers, you generally think like what, Drake, right? And stuff like that. So
there's Sunreal, who's a Vancouver rapper, but he's not really even that big in Canada. Obviously not in the United States.
So in a way, he was kind of one of the first like rappers to sort of be big in the U.S. Although it's kind of like not through his own means. He was part of a group, but still, yeah, there is some historical relevance to that part. Anyways, the song "Not For Sale," it's kind of like a going into it, I was just more expecting just kind of like straight rap, I guess. I didn't really know a whole lot about him. I remember you introduced him to me like way back. I forgot which song it was.
Because I remember when the Dangerous came out.
Yeah.
I was like maybe 10 years old.
Yeah, we were like on the cusp of middle school.
Yeah.
And like I kind of remember hearing. I remember Akon, because Akon was everywhere back in like 2008, 2009. He was on like every single, like one of those big singles. But I think it was like, I don't know, I just didn't know a whole lot about him, but I think you were sort of the first person to introduce me to him, I guess, I forgot who he was featured with. It was another rapper, I think, but I don't exactly remember who it was.
Well, the only songs I remember from back in the day that I heard was Dangerous with Akon, and then there was a song that came out in 2009 or 2010. They did with Akon as well, and a singer named Kobe O'Donis.
Okay.
And that song was called Beautiful, I think. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember that now.
Yeah, so that's the only thing I knew about him, and then I kind of expected from this album, going into it, that it would just sound like Dangerous or that song Beautiful, kind of poppy,
pop rap kind of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of saw like that was kind of like a popular sound back in like the late 2000s, early like 2010s. And I was never, like, personally, I was never really a fan of that kind of sound. Like, that really turned me off, like the pop rap sound, you know?
To me, it's just very generic.
It is pretty generic.
There's nothing special.
And I think, just listening to this album, I think the sound hasn't really aged all that well. A lot of the songs are
it's
pretty...
obvious where it comes from. And
yeah.
And it stays there. So.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a lot of, like, I guess, Jamaican, like, Caribbean influences in this. He does a lot of like the patois accent, where he refers back to like Jamaican roots. There's some reggae songs on here.
Since he is Jamaican,
yeah,
so it makes sense.
It does make sense. So yeah, there was nothing really on the album that really stood out for me. I think there were a few moments where he was actually rapping, and I was like, okay, he's got a little something. But overall, I think it's just kind of overshadowed by just all the other pop reggae influences, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm really a fan of that. I'm sure there's an audience for it, and maybe there's someone out there that's still a Kardinall Offishall fan, but I'm not entirely sure.
I don't even know if he's come out with anything recently.
Yeah, I think he's like, from the last I've heard of him, I think he's like still producing tracks, like producing like club tracks and stuff like that in Canada, but I don't think he's like a rapper or like performer anymore.
But the thing is that he just listen to this album. It just seems like obviously he has personality, but with this production though, it's like it just seems like there's nothing that wants to draw you into more of what he's made.
Yeah.
It's so generic.
Yeah, I wish like he does have like a personality. I feel like especially like the way because he does like I was sort of expecting kind of just like club tracks throughout the album, and I was kind of right in that regard. Like there were definitely like club tracks, you know, talking about, you know, a womanizing and just sort of the typical shit. But there were other songs that were more like politically driven, which I thought were kind of interesting. But I think the sound, like the reggae sound,
Exactly.
was kind of just turned me off of that, you know. And I think that if he, I feel like if he tried to use different sounds, maybe more, just more hip hop oriented sounds, and I think it would have caught my attention more. That's just talking from my own personal perspective.
I would have liked to see more Jamaican influence in the like in his beats.
Yeah.
Not so much electronic.
Yeah. I think that was like a big thing too. I think like considering that he is of Jamaican like descent, like I think it would have helped that if he like incorporated like actual like traditional like Jamaican tunes, like
kind of like Belafonte.
yes,
like, yeah,
exactly,
back
exactly,
to that.
kind of like back to that, you know. And I think like if he had more, yeah, traditional instrumentals and stuff like that, it would have been kind of interesting to hear. But he sort of stayed in like the electronic lane, and I think this type of album, I guess, is sort of akin to the very first album we reviewed, which is Tiny Tempo's Youth, where it's just very electronically produced, very pop oriented, and nothing really of anything of substance.
Yeah, but the thing is that I think it's obviously they're both from that time period, but I think it could also be that since he's Canadian, like somehow I guess like the British influence of that electronic type music especially hit Canada. I know it came to the United States obviously 2010, 2011
Right.
with like that, you know, all that like
Just
the
a lot of pop
Rocketeer
rap
so-
stuff. Yeah, exactly.
So it seems to me like it started probably in England and then late 2000s, early 2010s.
Yeah,
Like when it got big here in North
doesn't
America.
like England still kind of rely on that electronic sound though? I haven't really listened to a lot.
I feel like it still does in a way,
Yeah.
but I don't really listen to British music much. So, I mean, Tiny Tempo's pretty much the last thing that I heard. So.
Yeah. I think it's like interesting that a lot of these artists from that era kind of rely on sort of that electronic sound. I don't know why they do, because it's like maybe I don't know if it doesn't necessarily sound good. I do understand that it is catchy in a sense, and like there's kind of an appeal
for 10 years ago, but it's not really anymore now.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. I think it's just sort of like something that's sort of stuck in its time, you know. But yeah, let's talk about the song that actually sort of drew us in, which is the song "Dangerous" with Akon. Do you think? I still think that it's a pretty catchy song for the most part. But
I thought Digital Motown was a catchier song.
Do you think so?
I think. I mean, obviously, "Dangerous" is the one because Akon was big at the time.
Yeah.
It's obviously elevated his status in Canada.
Yeah.
And of course, the United States.
Yeah, it is much more of like an Akon song than it is for Kardinall Offishall. Nobody's gonna remember. Like it's more.
They're just kind of like that one guy who is from Canada.
Yeah.
Can't remember the name.
Who Akon, was happy enough to feature on, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know. I think, I think definitely like Akon himself sort of was the person that people paid attention most to, and I feel I can agree to that in some sense. And so that sound sort of carried throughout the album as well. Like you said, Digital Motown was a much more popular, catchier song in a way. But I wish like he did incorporate more just traditional like rap like tunes, I guess. Like the one song that I kind of liked was "Set It Off" going in with, I think it was the one featuring Pusha T, or with the Clips. Clips was a duo with Pusha T. We haven't really listened to their music yet. I'm thinking we might go back and listen to some of their albums maybe later on.
And the Drake beef, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that? I don't really necessarily know.
Well, I mean, I was saying like for future.
Oh, you're talking about
the Drake Pusha T.
Sure, we could talk about that another time, I guess.
Yeah.
We might have missed the ship on that, but we'll get back to that.
It's still notable.
It's still kind of notable, especially for this year. But yeah, Pusha T was featured on that song, and I kind of liked it. It was pretty aggressive. There was sort of like this, like war drum beat kind of thing going on. I kind of like that. Pusha T was just sort of talking about what he's what he's known for, which is selling drugs and shit like that, which works because he knows what he's doing. He's been doing that forever, and I feel like it sort of worked in that song. And I think I actually liked when Kardinall Offishall was rapping and he wasn't really using the Jamaican accent, where he was actually just using his normal voice in a sense,
I feel like I don't know about the Jamaican accent, but I feel like I guess it gets kind of overdone.
It was a little overdone.
That's the best way I can describe it.
I think it was too. I think,
or it was just out of place. I thought.
I think it was a little out of place for some songs. I mean, like I understand like what he was going for, but I just didn't think it was like the most effective in a sense. Like I said, like I wish he did rap a little more because it is much more like of a rap album. I wish it was just more rap oriented. I guess
Exactly.
but it was sort of like more just poppy and reggae influence. Rather than just straight rap, which is okay, I'm not trying to like say that it's like an inherently bad thing. I just wish he incorporated more, just more rap, elements to it, I guess.
I'm going over this track listing. I forgot that T-Pain and Rihanna were on this.
Yeah, he did have a lot of like pretty big like features on this
For the
album
time, yeah.
for the time too, which I'm surprised about. I don't necessarily know what kind of connections he had to like the American like.
I think he's buddies with Akon, and then obviously T-Pain was buddies with Akon too.
Okay, so there was that kind of.
Because I think T-Pain was signed
networking
under
connections.
Convict Music, which
Okay.
is Akon's thing.
Right. Yeah, he has some pretty big features on here. I completely forgot about that.
But the songs themselves are forgettable. I think that's probably why I don't.
That's the biggest thing. I think like there was nothing on here that was like
wasted talent.
Yeah, in a sense it was kind of wasted talent. I wish I wish that he did something a little more than just sort of stick to just what he was comfortable with. I don't necessarily know what else he could have done. I know he was a producer. He is a producer currently. Maybe he could have done something.
I have heard some songs off of his other albums, and they all sound like this pretty much.
Just kind of. I guess this is just his lane then,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, maybe this is just not for us.
Because as far as I know, at least in Canada, he's not very big.
Yeah.
And then obviously here, no one knows who he is or remembers who he is.
Especially nowadays, yeah.
Because it just seems to me like, as you know, I went to Canada for about a week.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems that in Canada, like everything follows trends here back home in America.
Yeah.
Like I mean everything, like
to a T.
Like the music. I mean, obviously I heard a lot of older music, like when I was at like bars or nightclubs when I was there, but. Which I thought was kind of weird, but then I would maybe turn on the radio or something, and then it's like the same stuff back home is playing. So
yeah, I think it's interesting that like like a lot of other countries too. I've noticed that like in Japan as well. Like they've basically I've sort of did a little bit of looking into it, and they also sort of follow the same thing as just like playing up to like American music, which I think is interesting.
What I find interesting too is like when I go to Mexico a lot, and like there's kind of a disconnect. So like if you go to the city, obviously like you hear American music, but you mostly hear Mexican stuff because they really want to like pay attention to their own music.
Of course, yeah.
And then what I noticed, it's just so weird in Canada because it's just like they follow so closely with like what we do here in America. Even you turn on the news, it's not CBC, which is their channel. It's like NBC here or like CNN, And it's just like, even if you turn on the Canadian channels, all they show is really just things going on in America.
Rather
seems like they don't really even talk about their own country.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I don't know, like, I really don't know a whole lot of, like, Canadian music, like traditional Canadian music,
it just seems to me like there was just no way of finding it,
Yeah, everything is just based from here. Like, even, like, popular, like, Canadian artists, you could talk about Drake, Justin Bieber.
Because everyone thinks that they're American. Yeah. And they obviously hide their Canadian accents.
Yeah, exactly. And now they're basically Americans at this sense. Even though Drake is trying as hard as he can to seem like he's like a representative of Toronto and all that.
I don't feel like he
really.
I mean, obviously I haven't heard all of Drake's music, but I feel like he doesn't show his Canadian.
Yeah, because like I don't.
It can be kind of understandable. Like maybe it could hurt his popularity here in America, but I think regardless, he's still going to be popular no matter what back home in Canada. I get that. So
I think I'm not trying to like rag on Canadian culture by any means. I just don't know if it's like there's nothing like that really like comes out of Canada that I feel is like really incredibly noteworthy. Because even like we could talk about this album as well. Like this album doesn't really have anything unique to Canada as well. You know, they take influence from like Jamaican music, like American pop music.
Because I know in Toronto there was at least a huge like Caribbean population, so
Yeah.
I felt like he could have. I mean, obviously he talks about his home.
Yeah, there's
T-Dot and all,
there's
so.
definitely some political influences there. I just wish that he did it in a more,
Mm-hmm.
just more convincing and more like, I guess charismatic way in a sense. Like there's nothing that he talked about that really hooked me. I feel like it was just a lot of things that it was just sort of like, okay, that's kind of like standard and that's understandable. You know, I wish that he talked more about like the political issues that are affecting Canada. You know, because that
Yeah.
would have been interesting to talk to.
I just feel like too. What I find really weird, like when I got back home, obviously, is that, like they in Canada they talk about what's going on here in America, and you kind of will see that like in other countries and whatnot.
Yeah, because
But I feel like it's so oversaturated. Like compared when I go to Mexico,
yeah.
but then when I come home, I don't see anything about Canada on the news.
No, I mean it's just like I don't know if like
so it's like do we not care about what's going on because
I think
it just seems
I think it's just that what the media shows is what we kind of get from Canada. You know, like I'm sure there are definitely a lot of ways that Canada and Canadian government economy how they have pretty significant impact.
because
to
all I
the
hear in
US,
the
you
news
know?
is like they say like Trudeau most
Yeah,
attractive leader in
and
the
then-
world and universal health care
and his defiance to Trump and all that. But like we don't
Yeah.
hear really anything else.
yeah,
you know?
but we don't usually hear anything about like Trudeau, like what he does for his country,
Yeah.
or just Canada, like things going on in Canada.
Yeah,
in
because
general.
like when it comes to like Canadian politics and whatnot, you have to actually like do like a little more digging than sort of look at the surface level articles that CNN, MSNBC, and all those other Fox News and whatnot they produce. You know, that's just all that's sort of the bare bones minimum. You know, they don't really pay that much attention to sort of like what happens like inside Canada, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I noticed. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, go
Okay,
ahead.
because I noticed like when I was in Vancouver, it feels like San Francisco, but a lot cleaner. I would say.
Yeah.
So it feels a lot like you're still in America,
Mm-hmm.
but there's obviously some notable differences, like the currency. Like you see the Queen of England. I guess they're one of those Commonwealth countries.
Mm-hmm.
So like they really admire the Queen and all that.
That's
there, and
interesting.
the royal family, because that's a common thing in all these countries that like technically have the Queen as their leader.
Right.
So technically Trudeau is not the leader of the country in a sense.
Right. They still kind of in a way adhere to England in a way.
Yeah, because
That's
if you look on the
interesting.
current, obviously I said the currency and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then, like, you'll notice subtle differences, like they use the metric system, which for me as an American is kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it is incredibly frustrating.
And then
at
I
times.
found it so weird how they would spell words differently. Like they add U's to the words like color and then
Yeah, because don't they do that like with like
we're like I think we're the only country that doesn't do that way of spelling. So
because I know like England it sort of does that kind of vernacular, I guess.
it's just weird how it just seems like they try to do like a weird fusion of like America and England.
Yeah,
in
right.
Canada. So.
Yeah, and they like I don't know. I'm not look. we're kind of. It feels in a way that we're ragging on them. It's just the way. Maybe it's just based from our own perception, but it just sometimes feels like they don't have like that. Like they don't have like a sense of identity. Like what we see Canada is like a stereotype, you know,
like their accents,
the accent and the
hockey,
way, and the way, their behavior, I guess, in hockey,
and like how polite they are.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
it is kind of true. Like when I would interact with with people in Canada, like especially the Canadians, they're actually really friendly.
Right.
I don't know. It's kind of like it just seems kind of I don't know about disrespectful, but it just seems weird how we don't pay attention that often to them.
Yeah, I think because I feel like they do. I'm sure they have like a sense of culture, you know, and I think that's kind of.
But could it just be our own media and whatnot that's just
I'm sure
not
there's
talking
a,
about
I'm sure
it
there's a
enough?
lot of influence. There's a lot of things that contribute to that. I think, yeah, definitely media representation of Canada kind of definitely like results in how we perceive like Canada and Canadians in general. But I don't know. Maybe they just don't really have that like significant of like a voice in like the world or whatever, you know. Maybe that's just sort of my like naive look at it.
Because also other things that I've heard too is like when it comes to like diplomacy, obviously, like we're allies with some countries and enemies with others.
Yeah.
Canada pretty much, well, at least from what I heard, follows pretty much exactly how the United States does it.
Right.
But I heard that the real only difference that they're somewhat friendly to the countries that we're technically against.
Mm.
And I was gonna bring this up
Yeah.
too when it comes to sports. So you obviously notice like in NBA there's at least one Canadian team, right?
Right.
Every league but the NFL
Mm-hmm.
because they got their own league.
They got a CFL though.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So I found it kind of weird too how they treat the Blue Jays, the Raptors, as like a national team.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
but yeah, because shouldn't they like be like more representative of Canada as a whole?
And then what I found so weird was that like in CFL, it just doesn't seem like very many people in Canada pay attention to it really.
Yeah.
And I even saw this thing. I think it was on Instagram where they this one guy from Canada who's a CFL fan asked, why is it that especially the Toronto team, the football team, has poor attendance? The metro area is something like 5 million people. They can't even fill up a stadium that holds 30,000 people.
That's crazy.
And this one guy, and then so obviously he was asked the question, and he said, think of it like this. The Toronto soccer team, so think of all the Toronto sports that have connections to the American leagues.
Yeah.
They draw a lot of fans simply because it's American money, American influence and whatnot. And though in the CFL there's a lot of American players on the team, here in America we don't really pay attention to the CFL.
Yeah.
And they technically use their own currency too, which is weaker than ours.
Right.
And it just seems like they
draw heavily from us.
And they would rather have an NFL team in Toronto than pay. Well, this is especially for Toronto area, because Toronto is so saturated with like American culture.
Yeah.
And just all the big cities, especially. You know what I'm saying? So Toronto, especially, is like global city, so it's like their version of New York.
Yeah.
And they want to be so much like America.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just find it kind of sad, like.
Yeah.
And the Toronto team won the championship last year, and still they can't fill up a stadium.
Right, that's crazy.
It's just so
It is kind of weird. Yeah.
It's just baffling to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I guess sort of drawing back to the album we reviewed, I think a lot of it is just the fact that they draw music and sports and just culture in general. They draw so heavily from American.
Except hockey, really, because they can fill up a huge arena.
Right. I think there's just so much of their cultures and customs that they draw from us, So I think going into this album, maybe I was sort of wanting some more something unique from it. I guess I don't know. Maybe I didn't necessarily know what to expect from this album, but I had a general sense of what it was going to be. I guess I think I just sort of to conclude my rambling. I guess I think I just this album as a whole is kind of symbolic of Canadian music as a whole, at least from my very narrow perception, is that it draws heavily from American and other traditional influences, but it doesn't necessarily capitalize on it or make it unique.
Yeah. Actually, I do have one more thing. I did notice this too.
Yeah.
So you know Alessia Carr, right?
Yeah.
She's from Toronto or the GTA.
Okay, I didn't know she was Canadian.
Yeah. So see how fascinating this is. Yeah. There's so many celebrities that we don't know.
Yeah, they don't. It's just weird. Why? I don't know.
It just seems weird how they try so hard to shed their Canadian identity. Almost.
Yeah.
And even Drake does this too.
Yeah.
Where obviously we all see him at Raptors games. He's known for that.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't seem like he projects it much, or in his own music, or just the way he is, sort of thing. And I noticed on the charts too. I saw this thing about how in Canada, that song that came out. What's that song called? The one that got her
something
big.
About the scars.
Yeah, that one.
Beautiful
exactly.
Scars or something.
So that one in the United States charted somewhere in the top 10 or top 5, highest peak.
Mm-hmm.
In Canada, it only got to 20 or 15 at the most. And it just seems weird how they don't
support their own artists.
Right. And whatnot.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because it just seems weird because obviously in other countries there's musicians from Mexico or whatnot Vicente Fernandez, or people like that, or Julieta Venegas, for example. She's a pop singer.
Yeah.
Technically she's from America, but she's really well known in Mexico.
Yeah.
And obviously they promote their music heavily, and you see this in other countries too, celebrities and singers especially from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
They promote their own things, and you know where they're from.
Yeah, and
you know what it's all about.
The people from their own country actually chart in
in their own countries, and even sometimes if they're lucky in America.
Right. But yeah, in Canada, it's like the opposite in a sense. And like
Yeah.
people in the top 10 are just generally like American artists, I guess.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I do respect Kardinall Offishall in a sense for sort of maintaining a sound, even if I'm not like the biggest fan of it. I
Yeah.
just think like there is something lacking from it because I think it was just so heavily like influenced by like American electronic sound, like
Or
electronic
even
pop
British
sound.
too, because
Yeah,
how
there's a
they
lot of
admire
like,
the Queen and everything.
yeah,
So.
yeah, that too. There could be some
And it's just weird
influences
how
there.
obviously we're not a Commonwealth country, how we don't acknowledge the Queen. Like we're just
No,
like,
no.
oh yeah, we know about her, but we don't care.
Yeah, because there's a whole revolution on that
Exactly, and Canada
Yeah.
was a bit different, so they're not really independent. So
Right. There's some.
I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but
No, I understand where you're coming
Yeah.
from. Like technically, they're not
Yeah.
independent. There's still some
Mhm.
connections to like the Queen of England and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Anyways,
well,
that was
I
something.
I don't hate Canada because I loved it when because Vancouver.
He did visit. Yeah,
yeah,
he did go to Canada.
because
Yeah.
Vancouver is an awesome city.
Yeah.
Definitely want to go back for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what I noticed.
Yeah.
I found kind of sad, like for Canada itself,
Yeah.
that they try playing off of different cultures too much.
Right.
But other than that, like definitely would want to go back.
Yeah,
there, so.
definitely. I think. Yeah, I just sort of going along with that. I don't necessarily I don't dislike like Canadian whatever. I'm just not very like I'm just sort of ignorant to what they have
That's
to
just
offer.
kind of like a fault of like I'd say a lot of Americans,
Mhm.
just being ignorant to what goes on.
Yeah.
Especially north of us,
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like I feel like it's important to know what neighboring countries have to offer,
Mhm.
not just not just the effect that we have
Yeah.
on them,
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I guess what do you think of the album just overall, I guess?
Just generic.
Generic, yeah. Yeah.
What did you think about it?
What did I think about it? I think I thought it was pretty generic for the most part. There were moments where I thought, okay, that was kind of interesting. There was like a little freestyle he had at one of the songs.
So he had some good
wrote it down.
rapping.
He had some-
and some catchy songs. Digital Motown.
Yeah,
Dangerous.
he had that, but I just think like it was just so drowned out by just like just sort of like the repetitive like pop sound. Yeah, because I noted down like he had a pretty nice freestyle at the end of the song "Do Me a Favor."
I forgot about the last half because as I told you I heard the album or
Mhm.
listened to it about a week ago.
Yeah.
Completely forgot about it and then only heard about the first half today. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't remember the second half of the album.
Yeah, I think it's just my own like what I wanted from the album. Maybe I think it's just not for me, but I also
Yeah.
feel like the album itself didn't really age all that well. I'd probably, if I would give it a rating, I'd probably give it like a 5 out of 10,
I
probably.
think I'll just go with a 4.
A 4.
Yeah.
I don't think it was bad by any means. I just didn't
Yeah.
think it brought anything new to the table.
I mean,
that hasn't been done before.
I mean, in my scale, 4 to me is like slightly below average, and the reason why I
Mhm.
say for this album is just because it just seems to me like it's just wasted potential, wasted talent
yeah.
and obviously it's there, but he just didn't capitalize on it. He didn't make himself like people say, "Wow, that's who Cardinal is."
Yeah, I wish he did bring out a little bit more of his personality and sort of like the things that he talked about, because I'm sure he had some interesting topics. Like he did bring up some political issues that he was concerned with, including racism
Mhm.
and economic strife and whatnot. I just wish that was more of the forefront rather than sort of being blended in with the rest of the poppy tracks.
I guess it's how it is in Canadian culture.
Yeah.
So.
Just sort of blends in together with everything else.
Yeah.
Step up your game.
We're not. We're just pointing out the flaws in it.
Yeah.
I don't hate Canada by any means.
Yeah, bring out.
love
I don't
our
know.
country.
Maybe bring out something unique. Maybe I'll, or maybe I have to actually go out and try to listen to some.
Maybe go to Canada.
Or maybe go to Canada and try to see if what they got over there.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, that's
poutine pretty much.
Yeah, they got poutine,
I mean, we
yeah.
just ate some right now.
yeah.
So.
It's pretty good, solid.
It's not the authentic I had, but it's close enough.
Right.
To what I can make.
Is a good taste of what they have to offer. So maybe
Exactly.
maybe I'll check out and see what else they have to offer.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyways, that's gonna probably do it for this episode. This has been Save the Semantics Hip Hop Discovery. Signing off.
Bye.